Hello, and thank you for joining us. I am Indrajeet Ghatge, Head of Behavioral Science at Phronesis Partners. Welcome to our webinar, The Power of Behavioral Science, Applying Behavioral Science to Improve Business Outcomes. And today I'm delighted to be joined by two applied behavioral science experts whose extensive experience and deep understanding of the topic will provide valuable insights for our discussion. Our first speaker for today is Kate Webster, Marketing and Product Innovation Design Strategist at Allstate. Kate has previously worked with Cogito, Capital One, Women's World Banking, and with subsidiaries of Wells Fargo Bank, which speaks of her deep and varied experience in the fields of banking, insurance, and information technology. In addition to an MBA from Richmond, Kate has a master's in behavioral science from the London School of Economics. Our second speaker for the day is Sara Portell, who is currently a PhD researcher in emotions and well-being at the Catholic University of Portugal. Until very recently, Sara held several senior leadership positions in behavioral science, user research, and product development with organizations like Unit4, Shopify, and Expedia, amongst others, thus corroborating her rich corporate experience in enterprise software, e-commerce, retail, and online travel and hospitality. Sara has a master's in international business from ESSEC Business School and, of course, a master's in behavioral science from LSE. For our esteemed audience, if you have any questions during our discussion, please enter them in the questions box at the side of your screen. So you'll see it on the top right corner. And of course, we'll try to answer those questions at the end of at the end of this of the webinar. Keep in mind that we are recording today's session and we will send you a link to the recording or the replay. So thank you for being here. Let's get started. But just a minute, before we get started, I realize we have close to 50 people that have registered for today's webinar. And so I'm presuming that some of them are very new to behavioral science. So for the uninitiated, behavioral science is the science of understanding human behavior. It delves into the why and how of human behavior. Behavioral science helps us understand behavior, predict behavior, and influence behavior. It's a blend of a number of disciplines like psychology, economics, neuroscience, and some others. So, with that, let's get started with the first question for our guests today, Kate and Sara. Kate and Sara, what are your thoughts about the usefulness of behavioral science and its applications in the business world?
So I can jump in and get us started. Thank you all for joining us, and Indrajeet, thank you for that great introduction. I think this is a great place to start our conversation today because it really sets the stage for behavioral science. I think too often when behavioral science comes up in a business context, it's reduced to just nudging, as if it's only about subtle tweaks in messaging or about setting defaults. But its value really goes far beyond that. Behavioral science gives us a lens to understand how people make decisions, how they navigate complexity, and how they take actions. So these are insights that can transform really everything from product design to organizational strategy. So the simplest answer to your question about usefulness is that it's useful because it improves outcomes for both the business and the customer. But to dig deeper than that, over time, the way we have approached business problems has evolved. And it's driven by a deeper understanding of people and what influences their behavior, alongside advances in technology and data. Behavioral science really plays a critical role in this evolution. And it helps us move beyond assumptions to better understand how people actually think, how they decide and act in the real world, or it could be the decision environment that they're in. We all know, people aren't always logical or consistent because context influences our behavior. Behavioral science gives us the tools to uncover the patterns and design strategies that align with how people truly behave, not how we assume they should or how we want them to. So, by understanding how people form mental models, how they navigate complexity and make choices, which are often made under cognitive strain or uncertainty, we can create solutions that are not only functional, but also appealing and emotionally resonant and behaviorally intelligent. So, businesses that embed behavioral thinking are better equipped to meet human needs, to influence meaningful outcomes, and drive a sustainable impact. And I think whether you're talking about improving customer experiences, shaping product interactions, or designing more effective communications, or even organizational change, applied behavioral science allows businesses to anticipate and guide decisions more effectively, while also providing a strategic advantage.
And echoing what Kate is saying, and maybe coming up as well from my perspective, experience leading user research in marketplaces like Expedia or Shopify in the past. Behavioral science has been really a strategic tool to understand behavior, also to shape it. It had help us make sense of how people behave in very messy real world situations. And it's been a very useful tool, not just for me and my direct teams, but also product and engineering teams and other functions that I work very closely with. It's been helping to focus on the right priorities around what users need, what are the business trying to solve, and just maybe sharing some example from my time at Shopify. We spent a lot of time doing research with business owners internationally to understand their onboarding experience. We were launching Shopify in multiple markets. And well, one thing after doing a lot of research in different markets, we saw one thing keep jumping out, and it was how much behavior and context, as Kate was mentioning, was actually shaping their early engagements with the platform. So it wasn't the need for us to understand their interaction with the product itself. What we were lacking was a deep understanding of their behaviors and the context of the culture. So we looked at habits, how people build trust, cultural norms, what actually motivates them to go and set up their first online store in this case. So that understanding really helped us to focus on what really matters to optimize that experience or that product, that solution that you are aiming to. And inside organizations, it's also been really helpful to help amplify the impact of the research. I liked user research functions in the past, and if you want people to absorb insights or change direction, you also need to understand how they take in feedback, how they make decisions. And a powerful tool that really helped there was we used to communicate research results using a collection of research clips, short videos showing real users having friction points. And you could see clearly a shift in the room. Right? Suddenly, it wasn't an abstract issue that we were discussing on a report, on a slide deck. It was real. It was creating high empathy in the room. So that empathy and that emotional punch made that problem stick and nudge the teams to act with much more urgency, probably than much more than a report that could do on his own. So just as an example, now also inside organization, how powerful it is. Behavioral science has been really helpful because it keeps the teams grounded in how people really think, how they feel, how they make decisions, as Kate was mentioning. So it helps really build solutions that make sense to people, so that people that are going to be using those solutions, and of course, they're going to be much more meaningful for them.
That's excellent, Kate and Sarah. Thank you so much. Very, very interesting. I'm also compelled to add that behavioral science and behavioral insights are useful across the business spectrum. So everything from B2B to B2C and from D2C to C2C, Because sometimes there are misconceptions that behavioral science is good for B2C businesses only, but that's not true. Behavioral science is applicable wherever there are humans involved in any part of the business value chain. So with that, my next question to the two of you is: how do you think principles of or rather principles from psychology and economics can help businesses achieve the desired outcomes, because these are the two important elements that make up behavioral science.
Yeah, as you noted, behavioral science is really rooted in psychology and economics, and it helps businesses drive better outcomes by providing a more realistic model of human behavior, which is important as we're making business and consumer decisions. The traditional economic models assume people are rational, but we know it's not true. And behavioral science acknowledges that people are influenced by cognitive biases, by emotions, context, and even social dynamics. And so by understanding these forces, we can better design strategies that align with how people actually behave, as Sara mentioned. So the way that I see behavioral science driving business outcomes most in my work is around improving decision making, both internally and externally. So as you both mentioned, that application of it is very broad and goes across the value chain, both internally and externally. But then also in enhancing product and service design and in shaping customer and user behavior. So I currently work in insurance, which is a hard product to sell because you are basically selling a contract that is based on trust. It's also one of the only products you buy hoping to never have to use. So when we think about it from that context, it poses a lot of challenges. People often don't understand why they need it. Many have never experienced a loss, or they think it won't happen to them, or they don't understand the product or what coverages they need. So we're dealing with issues of cognitive load and low self-efficacy. And then there's a real significant inherent issue with trust in the industry. And when that's essentially what the contract is, this is a significant set of barriers to overcome. So psychology helps us to uncover those biases and mental shortcuts that people use. So things like availability bias or loss aversion. But economics provides us the framework to understand the trade-offs and the incentives and or even opportunity costs. So together, they can help us design clearer choices, reduce decision fatigue for our users, and really encourage more optimal actions. So whether we're talking about the customer journey or employee behavior or policy adoption. And I think too, when we can understand concepts like cognitive load, we understand emotional triggers and and behavioral patterns, it allows teams to be able to design more intuitive, accessible, and emotionally resonant products.
And
Sorry,
tapping on
sorry,
what
you have anything to add to that? Yes,
Yes,
go
yes,
ahead.
it really resonates. Of course, what Kate was saying. We all know we are not always perfectly rational, and so principles grounded on psychology and economics are actually give businesses better ways to influence behavior and to actually have a more realistic view of how people make decisions. And as discussed, we are shaped by context, by habits, by social norms, and mental shortcuts. So when businesses understand those drivers, they can really design experiences and interventions that work with human nature instead of against it. When I was at Expedia, maybe just to throw an example, one of the things we focused was on making it much easier for travelers to choose where to stay, to book an accommodation. And booking can feel very overwhelming. There are a lot of choices, so many different types of accommodations, infinite destinations. So we use choice architecture and framing. What we basically did was to guide people, to guide users towards better decisions without taking away their options. And we saw a real lift in conversions by doing simple things such as cutting down number of options shown in the search results, or having curated lists around specific themes, so that the whole experience felt much more manageable, much more tailored, or nudge some users towards login and add their travel dates. And by doing that, they make a micro commitment, which activated the implementation intention, and it was nudging people closer to action, as it was making the travel plan feel more real for them. So when business design interactions that align how people feel, how people behave, they build better products, much more human-centered solutions, and we see, of course, the outcomes as a result. And it may feel as small changes, but at a scale, they really make an impact on business metrics.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sara and Kate. Sara, I'm sure that our audience will very much relate to what you shared with regarding your experience at Expedia, because all of us in today's day and age have some experience, at least booking online travel. So, so that makes a lot of sense. And Kate, you made a very interesting point about the fact that psychology helps us understand the biases that we are under the influence of, and economics helps us. It kind of gives us a framework to understand the economic or the financial trade-offs, or also something very interesting that you mentioned, the opportunity cost, what you could have done in what you could have achieved had you not done this. Or so
Mhm.
so that's those are great insights from both of you. So Kate and Sara, both of you have worked in a variety of industries in your career, and you have also applied behavioral science for at least a decade or more in your work. And that brings me to the next question. What are the major challenges in your industry, and how have you used behavioral science to address them? And when I say industry, it can mean your current or former organization, or even a sector that you were working in earlier but have now switched to some other.
Well, in my case, one of the biggest challenges in enterprise SaaS, where I have spent the last 6 years at places like Unit 4 or Shopify, is been helping people get through really complex, high stake situations or tasks. And I'm talking about tasks or workflows like processing an invoice or handling payments or completing a financial report, anything compliance. So these are really simple click and done tasks. People are under a lot of pressure, they're dealing with a lot of information, they're making important decisions, and often they feel mentally drained. So behavioral science here really helps designing in a way that supports better decision making and reduces frictions on that experience. We know that our brains do better with a smaller, with more manageable chunks of information. So we use techniques like cognitive offloading and chunking, which essentially breaks big processes into manageable steps and reveals information and function progressively, so people only see what they need to focus on that at the time. And it makes a huge difference in keeping users on track without overwhelming them. We also lean on goal gradient theory to keep people motivated. The idea that the closer someone feels to finish a task, the more effort they're going to put in get it done. So we add visual indicators, progress indicators to show users how far they come, what was left to do, and that little sense of progress really creates a psychological reward and keeps people much more engaged and likely to stick with it. And we also use micro feedback, simple confirmation messages, or subtle reinforcement in each step keep up the motivation and make the process feel much more clear. So for me, behavioral science, it's been really essential for tackling challenges in enterprise SaaS helping users navigate that immense complexity without getting stuck, and designing in ways that empower people to complete those high stake tasks with much more control.
Yeah, Sarah, I completely resonate with everything you said, and to your earlier point around sometimes it's small changes that have a significant impact. Sometimes these individual elements or small elements can be very persuasive, and I think the insurance industry faces many similar challenges in that it's complex. It's also undergoing rapid transformation, just like many others. There's a mix of external pressures, technological shifts, and really changing customer expectations around things like personalization, use of data, speed, and responsiveness. All of these things are universal challenges across sectors. Yeah, and I think what we're seeing within insurance specifically is it's really a low engagement and low relevance type of product. It's one of these products that people want to set and forget. It's like a grudge purchase where people buy it because they have to or they feel some obligation to buy it, but they rarely interact with it. They don't want to interact with it because if they do, it means something's gone wrong in their life. And so this really limits the opportunity for us to create value and to build emotional connections with our customers. So, in addition to many of the things that Sara mentioned, one of the challenges that we're having is trying to move from a reactive to a proactive kind of relationship with our customers. And so starting to think about how do we develop new programs that deliver value beyond what that kind of traditional mental model says insurance is. And part of that is exactly what Sara mentioned around designing these frictionless, more emotionally intelligent experiences that help to build trust and loyalty, that feed into this kind of on-demand, digital-first, personalized experience expectation that we're seeing, as a more prevalent expectation across all sectors. The other challenge we have is that the industry is really full of complex policy language and disjointed experiences, and all of that plays into this issue of eroding trust and satisfaction. And then technology further disrupts all of that with AI, the Internet of Things, and in our industry, the use of telematics and predictive analytics, which on one hand creates opportunities for innovation and presents opportunities to really change traditional underwriting and claims models, but it also creates challenges to be able to respect consumer preferences around data privacy. So all of that, and then mix on top of that increasing risks of climate change and costs of repairs due to inflation. We've also looked at issues around how do you build climate resilient products that also maintain profitability in an area that's really fraught with political polarization. And there's really numerous biases at play in terms of people's recognition of it even being an issue they acknowledge and or their willingness to do anything about it to protect themselves. So it's a really interesting space to be in. Our work has covered really a range of protection needs across climate change, smart home adoption, teen safe driving. We're even looking at some elder care solutions and also telematics. So how do we leverage this new set of real-time data in our product sophistication and the experiences as well?
Wonderful. So how did you use behavioral science to design better products or improve processes or create long-lasting customer impact and value? So, Kate, in your industry, insurance, or Sara, in your previous industry, how maybe like one or two examples in less than a minute or so. I'm just mindful of time. We have quite a few
Sure.
questions to go through, but if you can just share some insights on that.
Yeah, so one of the examples that I just briefly mentioned is around teen safe driving experience. So this is still in development, but this was really born out of a business problem. So parents of teens are some of the most desirable customers in terms of lifetime value. But due to the risk of new teen drivers, we're losing them because we can't price it effectively. Increase risk, increase price. And so, the challenge becomes, how do we retain and attract these customers? So we really want to look at ways that we can reduce the risk of the teen driver. So we did extensive research on both new teen drivers as well as the parents to understand the pain points and the opportunities within this space. We identified that there is a gap in the market and an opportunity to develop an experience that is both differentiated and has a high perceived value for these families, while helping to develop safe driving behaviors in teens. So the experience that we're building really leverages an understanding of habit formation and integrates key elements to develop and reward positive behaviors while providing value to the parents to be able to be engaged and have oversight and track progress. So, as we develop these kinds of products, we define the higher level design requirements of the experience as a whole, and then we move through the process and we refine the experience, the UX and the UI, to really optimize it for continued engagement and to drive the desired outcomes. So this includes, understanding those key biases. What are the motivational drivers? What's the regulatory fit? So are they trying to promote something or prevent something? In this case, it's different. The parents are trying to prevent accidents from their teens, and the teens are trying to promote safe behaviors. So we know by leveraging behavioral science, we can also incorporate elements of perceived choice and control, which also drive satisfaction. So really all of the kind of key elements of behavioral science come into play when we're looking at building these kind of net new products and experiences for our customers.
And also
That's
sharing an example, probably the one that was referring earlier, Shopify launching into new markets and looking into the onboarding experience. And we look into how behavior differ across cultures, and that contextual understanding really changed how we address the launch on those new markets and optimize the entire experience. So for instance, in India, so many users, they are mobile first or mobile only, which means they are navigating, onboarding on small screens. They may be even creating their online stores on a mobile device, and often with inconsistent internet connection. So very important for us to put a lot of attention there on the mobile experience, speeding up load times, simplifying layouts, using progressive disclosure to keep each step very clear, very manageable, and nudging users towards a mobile app where things were a little bit more stable. But then when we went to Germany, the pattern was totally different. Users tended to be very detail oriented, very conscious. They wanted to understand all the ins and outs before committing. And so the approach was different, right? So we brought local trust signals, certifications upfront, detailed information on pricing, data security, and that helped build credibility early and made users felt much more confident with the platform. And then we switched to Japan, and we did also some research there, and we saw completely different patterns there as well. Their users were placing high value on the design of their online store. They were gravitating towards stores that they were very clean, very refined, and in line with local aesthetics. So we realized that there was a cultural reference there with design that we weren't really addressing, and it was important to look into it in similar ways that e-commerce sites were looking like on that market, and competitors were offering. So all in all, that show how important it is to, and what we were mentioning, and Kate also reiterated, aligning the experiences with behavior, with expectations, mental models. We were able to make users feel much more at ease, much more confident, and of course that had a significant impact on what we saw in terms of conversion on those markets.
Yeah, I think Sarah makes a really important point around the influence of context and the importance of understanding the context in which somebody is making a decision. I think we run the risk sometimes of applying some of these behavioral principles more generally without really understanding the role of context and how that influences the outcomes. And so there, I think that's a really great example of the need to do the research and really understand how it works in context.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you, Kate. Behavioral science is all about context, and without adequate research, we won't really know what exactly is uh, the root cause of the problem. Thanks for stressing on the importance of research. My next question is, how have managers and executives become better at making sound business decisions due to knowledge of biases and heuristics? And when I say managers and executives, these could be your colleagues in your organizations, or these could be people on the client side. Uh, Either way.
Okay, I'm happy to jump in. um, well, I've seen personally my 15 years working in tech, so I can maybe explain a little bit my experience of working specifically with product and engineering leaders. I see a shift in leadership decision making. I think there is a growing awareness of how group dynamics, of how cognitive biases can distort judgment. There is much more recognition now that what I see when I start working in tech, that just because someone had a loud voice on the room or very strong opinion doesn't mean that they are right. And that's where the understanding of biases, heuristics, really comes in. So when leaders are aware of things like confirmation bias or authority bias, they start to move away from relying on that gut instinct or internal consensus. I've seen this directly where instead of deferring to the most vocal stakeholder in the room, teams start leaning on behavioral data and user insights to guide product decisions. And these results, of course, in much stronger alignment with user needs and better business outcomes. I also noticed there is much more deliberate decision-making techniques being applied, things like pre-mortems, technique where the team imagines a project has failed and works backwards to identify what could lead to that failure. So it helps us to uncover risk and strengthen the plan before execution. Other techniques that I've seen also being put in place, anonymous feedback or synchronous reviews, and all that push back groupthink and make the room for diverse perspectives, for people from different backgrounds, quieter voices. So all these methods really help ground decisions in evidence rather than hierarchy or suppressed opinions due to group thinking. So overall, I think behavioral science helps managers, helps executive leaders in organizations to think more critically and shift that decision making from opinion based to evidence based, and of course that creates real value for the business.
Yeah, I completely agree and would reiterate the things that Sarah said as well. I think from my experience, I've seen that it enables leaders to lead with greater self-awareness and effectiveness because, to Sarah's point, it helps them to recognize the limitations of their intuition, which leaders often rely on intuition, which is shaped by our experiences, but also, those cognitive shortcuts can lead to errors. And so by this having a deeper understanding, leaders can pause, they can challenge their assumptions, and they can seek the more complete and objective data, as Sarah was mentioning. I think it also allows them to structure better decision-making environments. They can break the complex choices down into smaller steps, and the outcome of these environments is higher quality group decisions, less anchoring on the early opinions, as Sarah mentioned, and really improved critical thinking. So, I think that we've got a number of biases that tend to creep up in many of these decision-making situations, and many of them can be emotionally fraught as well. But behavioral awareness can really help leaders to embrace more calculated risks rather than what's always worked for them. They can reframe failure as learning instead of as a loss, which many of these leaders are afraid of failure, and really can reevaluate investments based on current value, not past effort. So we can have more agile and forward-looking strategies.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sara and Kate, and it's wonderful that you underlined the importance of critical thinking, because I think as humans we ought to recognize that regardless of the nature of our work, the positions that we are in, the designations that we carry, and the power we have or don't have, we are all influenced by biases. And why just managers and executives, right? Like even behavioral scientists like us, even we are
Right.
under the influence of implicit biases and so many others. So great. That brings me to the next question, and just because of paucity of time, I'm just going to club the next two questions into one question. In what other ways have you been able to use behavioral science to achieve tangible benefits at your company or for your clients? And any nudges that have helped guide consumer choices in your respective industries?
Sure, I can jump in. So across the various companies that I've worked in, I'll just highlight one that I think is really interesting for this question. So when I was with Cogito is an artificial intelligence company that's based on behavioral science. And so its primary use case is to help customer contact centers so that when you have an agent who is in a conversation with a customer, it is a tool that provides real-time guidance and nudging to agents to make the conversation more effective. So what it does is it actually analyzes 200 different variables of your voice. It's agnostic to words. So it's looking at tone, pitch, uh, pace, a whole variety of things, and then is able to assess whether or not, based on those variables, the conversation is delivering the desired outcome for the user. So there were a number of things in implementing this technology that we needed to consider. One was getting agents to use it. It required building new habits on the agent side to adopt this tool. So we worked through a number of different nudges to be able to do that. One is getting them to start using it more frequently, included things such as including an icon on their desktop, prompts, those kinds of things. But then in the actual usage of the tool, also building in nudges so that in real time that conversation could be adjusted. So there would be pop-ups that would tell the agent, slow down or take a pause, or various things to break the patterns if it was seeing that the conversation was not being delivered as effectively as possible. And so those real-time nudges actually proved to be quite effective in terms of driving improved customer satisfaction with the experience with the agents.
Thanks, Kate. Sara, you have anything to share?
Yeah, maybe one example, I'm following up on the notches. One example from Expedia comes to mind as well, and how we use them as well to shape how people make decisions, especially in those situations where there is a lot of noise and it's hard to choose. So of course, we used elements like default settings or progress bars, timely reminders, and that can make a big difference. One of them that we use to help people at Expedia, to help people in a way that felt more natural and more empowering, for instance, was on the search results page, on searching for an accommodation. We would be showing messages like, and you probably have seen it if you've been on the platform, on any travel platform, only two left at this price, or book 30 times in the past 24 hours. And those type of messages, they type into scarcity and social proof behavioral cues. So it really helps people decide faster by highlighting that option is very popular in that area or may not be around for long. So that eases the fear of missing out on people and making the wrong call. But what's important here with notches, and I think it's good to highlight that notches don't limit options. They shouldn't be limiting options or pushing people. They should just surface the most relevant information when users need it. So when done ethically and transparently, notches can really reduce friction, better ways, propose better ways to digest information and help people make better choices, which of course leads to a much more satisfying experience.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And just to be clear, I purposely asked Kate and Sarah for examples of nudges that can help guide consumer choices. But that's because nudges are more commonly spoken about in mainstream media. But I want to make one thing very clear for our audience, that behavioral science is not just about nudges. Nudges are, of course, a type of intervention to bring about behavior change, but they're not the only one. And there are many other techniques like boost or self-regularization, incentives, um, goal setting, advocacy, and so on and so forth. Um, my next question, what I'm going to do, Kate and Sarah, again, is I'm going to club the two questions because they're similar, but you'll get you'll understand what I'm trying to ask. So again, I'm going to ask you for examples of behavioral insights influencing marketing and advertising campaigns. One, and second is consumer, whether it has brought positive changes in consumer engagement and or sales. So first is marketing and advertising, and second is consumer engagement or sales.
Great.
And
Okay. Go ahead, Sarah.
no, it's fine. Um, I can share an example from my time at Expedia as well. That actually we use biometrics in our research to better understand people emotional reactions to advertisement campaigns. So we use eye tracking, and we also use emotion recognition software that help us analyze facial micro expressions to detect emotional responses in real time. So one of the campaigns we tested um, had different scenes, and they were meant to evoke warm, very family vacations feeling, families enjoying time together with their children, relatives, several type of accommodations. And one clip we included was showing a dad playing with his baby daughter in a pool, and was tossing her gently in the air. And we thought that was very sweet, it was a playful moment. But the biometric data and later interviews told us a different story. A lot of moms who are often the primary decision maker for family trips were actually freaking out. They found the same very stressful, was producing them anxiety to think that the baby could fall. So it totally shifted our perspective. That insight helped us fine tune the campaign, and of course to show joyful moments, family moments that they felt safe and that parents could relate to. So this is an example of how we, of course, use behavioral insights and marketing and advertisement, and that can help us reveal, especially when paired with biometrics, can really help us reveal that emotional impact of a campaign, and lead to marketing that resonates better with customers and is more effective.
Yeah,
All right.
similarly,
Yeah, Kate, go ahead.
so similarly, when I was at Capital One, we used behavioral science in a couple of initiatives, specifically within marketing and advertising. My role there was as a senior creative director. And so my teams were being asked all the time to solve the same business problem, but in new ways. So at one point we had a campaign need that came to us. It was a direct mail campaign, and Capital One got its start in direct mail. But what they wanted to do was they wanted to break the behavior they had built of having people who receive a direct mail solicitation respond by direct mail because it's an expensive acquisition channel. So instead, they wanted to drive them to the web for application. So this required quite a bit of understanding of the behaviors and what is driving this response. We're more inclined to respond in the same channel in which we're solicited in versus to break it. So we did a lot of behavioral research to really understand what are the key motivations behind this desire to respond by direct mail, and how do we build the direct mail campaign in a way that helps break that convention and creates a sense of safety by applying through the web experience. So we tested a number of different creatives, and various motivations were included in it to prime, as well as key visual cues. And really what it came down to was it was about safety and security. People had this old mental model that direct mail was a safer channel to put personal information in than web, which we know is not the case. But this was the convention we were dealing with. And so we built the creative to actually feel like a web experience. And we included key visual cues, things like the Norton security bug and things like that on the creative, the direct mail creative, so that people felt less of a transition when they went from direct mail to the web experience. And we actually saw great success with this campaign. The creative that we ended up launching in market after multiple rounds of testing had significant results and actually became the champion creative for quite a while because its effectiveness was so great in terms of driving web applications.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah and Kate. And we are getting interesting questions in the chat box as well. So thank you for sharing excellent examples on how you've designed behavioral interventions to aid with marketing and advertising campaigns as well as sales, and not just like telling us what those interventions or nudges have been, but also like the story or the journey of how you developed them and what was the rationale behind those. So very interesting stuff. um, Talking of the business world, we often tend to look for a positive uptick in the top line, which is the revenue, and the bottom line as well, which is the profits. And so it's evident that behavioral science is also looked upon to provide monetary benefits in the near term, medium term, or long term. So, what is the future of applied behavioral science in the private sector or in the corporate world, where return on investment or ROI, top line and bottom line numbers are of paramount importance?
So, as we've mentioned a little bit already today, I think we're now seeing behavioral science being used to shape full customer journeys and to influence product and pricing strategies and really even guide how companies launch and scale new offers. So it's not just about making something easier to click, but it's about understanding how people think and feel and decide and designing for that. So this directly drives revenue. In product, we use behavioral science to build features that people actually use. In pricing, it can help with framing offers in ways that increase the perceived value. In customer experience, it can reduce churn by removing friction before it even really becomes a problem. So I think the most forward-looking companies are now building what I'd call behaviorally intelligent products. And so this is tools and apps that adapt to human behavior in real time. They can prompt and guide and reinforce the right actions, which lead to better engagement and loyalty. It also allows us to be smarter in our experimentation. So instead of testing at random, teams are now running more meaningful experiments based on real models like the COM-B or BJ Fogg's behavior model. And this leads to faster learning and stronger outcomes. So it's not just good for business, but good for trust. And I think when companies use behavioral science transparently and ethically, it creates a better customer relationship where people feel seen and understood and supported. So I think behavioral science is no longer a side experiment or some quirky campaign tactic, but it's really becoming a core lever for growth, retention, and smart leadership. And the businesses that get this right are going to have a serious edge because they're designing not just for function and aesthetics, but for real human behavior.
I totally agree with what Kate has said, and maybe to also add, I think it's important to mention how I mean the future could also be very well depending on how well we keep showing that value of what is it that we are doing now, especially in ways that speak to business. So in areas, for instance, like product and UX, some of the bigger wins may come from very small but very well-informed incremental tweaks that improve how things work. And those changes may seem minor, but over time they really have a huge impact on performance. So the key of keep tracking that impact, making sure it holds up, that we're able to demonstrate positive outcomes over time in a sustained way. Very important to keep that measuring and tracking. And more broadly as well, I see behavioral science becoming more embedded, part of the day-to-day tools, rituals, which I already seen it much more than a few years ago, and embed that thinking and into the teams that is shaping business and product decisions. So it's about, of course, helping leaders and teams to make better choices, better decisions, and I think that's when it really becomes very valuable.
Indeed, indeed, yes. Um, what's your take on the newfound interest in AI or artificial intelligence, and how do you think it is changing or disrupting the field of applied behavioral science?
So personally, I think AI is really supercharging what behavioral science can do. It's traditionally been great at helping us understand why people do the things they do, but now it gives us really the ability to scale those insights, to predict behavior more accurately, and even personalize interventions in ways that we couldn't before, and do it all more quickly. So for example, instead of running one A/B test at a time, we can now run thousands of micro experiments simultaneously and learn what works for different people in different contexts. And it can take everything that we know about habits and motivation and cognitive biases and apply it at scale. So a digital app might know the exact right moment to nudge someone to go for a walk or to stick to a savings goal. It's no longer just this kind of one size fits all nudging, but it's more so tailored to the individual. And as Sara mentioned, it's also enabling enhanced research and testing tools, which give us deeper consumer insight. So we can now look at vocal and facial patterns. Emotional analysis is more sophisticated. So the insights that we're getting are much richer. And it can allow us really to do a better job of identifying patterns and find friction points in the customer journey, predict when somebody's possibly likely to churn, or even uncover hidden biases that are present in a product or a decision environment.
Exactly, and to build on what Kate mentioned, also, I think it's important to remark that the core challenge remains the same, which is understanding people, understanding human behavior, and of course, AI can help surface patterns and optimize outcomes as never before, automate tasks, but it doesn't understand context, emotion, human motivation, meaning, and that's where behavioral science plays a role. Um, it's very important to, of course, interpret the why people behave the way that they do, and make sure the interventions are aligned with those human values and needs. And of course, we can personalize experiences and user behavior with AI in real time. But whatever that personalization is guiding and nudging people towards better outcomes, or is exploiting their attention or optimizing for the wrong outcomes, it depends on the behavioral thinking behind it. So I see AI and behavioral science really complementary here, giving us AI new tools, of course, to reimagine experience, to test, to personalize at scale. But behavioral science help us keep asking better questions, understand that behavior, that need to inform those experiences and experiments, and apply it responsibly.
Yeah, excellent points, Kate and Sarah. And I always feel that, I mean, I use AI for secondary research, but I always, you know, combine it with what I, would find on Google Scholar, just to make sure that, it's authentic. Uh, I would also use AI sometimes to kind of have a relook at my research and experimentation plan that I have for a behavioral intervention that I've designed. And it is, of course, helpful at different stages in the behavioral science intervention development process. You can use AI, but I also feel that it's important to use, as Sarah, you said, for it to complement natural intelligence. Artificial intelligence, I think, should complement natural intelligence, because I still feel that, especially when you want to think critically about things, some of the AI tools or models actually don't do a very good job yet, because I still feel there's a long way to go for artificial intelligence to be able to replicate, imitate, or emulate the human mind or the human heart. And so I think we're getting there, but I think it'll take time. So I think it's important that people use AI judiciously, along with their own natural intelligence, and think critically about the outputs or the answers or the responses that you get to the prompts that you use on the AI tool. So don't just take everything uh, blindly. Think about it, and then see if you can combine the best of both worlds. How do you think, Kate and Sarah, can uh, an understanding of behavioral science aid product innovation and market disruption?
Well, behavioral science help product teams and business leaders stay grounded, as we've been commenting until now, and to understand really how people behave, not just how we wish or assume that people do. And honestly, that's often the difference between a product that really takes off and one that doesn't get much traction, right? So when we're trying to innovate, we're actually asking people to change, to acquire a new behavior, whatever it is, trying something new, breaking an old habit, maybe changing a tool. And that's never easy. So behavioral science provides that understanding on the real drivers of motivation, how we make decisions, what's getting on the way of that change. So even if we feel that we have a great product, better product to what exists in the market, maybe the technology is very advanced, that may not be enough. You still have to lower the barriers to switching, address things like status quo, we always done it this way, and help build confidence on that new whatever it is that you are introducing in the market. So behavioral science, of course, doesn't guarantee a breakthrough, but improve the odds by helping design for people needs, challenges, and how people make choices in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to quickly build on what Sarah said, disruption means you're asking people to behave differently. So you're asking them to try something new or try a different model or take a risk. So behavioral science gives us the tools to design those experiences or build new habits around the product. And it helps us see the human side of innovation. It reveals why people resist or embrace change and gives us those tools to design for how people actually think and decide and behave.
Yes, and I understand that we are almost at time, but this is a very good discussion, and we still have a couple of questions to ask Sara and Kate. And I know we are getting good questions in the chat box also from our audience. So we might just run over a little bit, 5 or 10 minutes maybe. We'll just take maybe one question, and then we will uh, take some of the questions that you have asked in the audience and then answer those. But of course, if you have to leave for other engagements, then you're free to do so. We will obviously be sending you the recording of this webinar. But then for those that are interested, you may continue to stay for the next 5 or 10 minutes at the most. I'm going to again then club two questions and ask you in one go, Kate and Sara. What final advice would you give to the business world that's keen on using behavioral science to understand and solve problems, deliver better business outcomes, and continue having happy customers? And also, what advice would you give to the world of market research? How should they use behavioral science, and what will happen if market research doesn't uh, kind of take the best that's there from behavioral science and just sticks to traditional market research?
I think to your first question, in terms of businesses considering implement it, the answer is simple: just do it. In terms of market research, I think behavioral science can enhance the field of market research significantly by strengthening the accuracy of insights, which includes things like understanding the difference between behavior and intentions, the awareness of biases, contextual understanding of behavior. It also allows us to design better research methods. So there are a variety of behavioral research methodologies that I've employed through my career, which have gotten us to much richer insights that then directly influence the outcome of a product. It also allows us more sophisticated segmentation methodologies beyond just demographic or life stage segmentation, which is very traditionally used. It allows us to segment based on psychographic or behavioral segmentation, based on different cognitive styles, risk tolerances, motivational profiles, those kinds of things. And it makes our research more actionable. So it generates clearer behavioral hypotheses that can be directly used to influence marketing, design, and policy interventions. So I think there is a lot of potential in application for market research.
And adding what Kate was mentioning, which totally align, my biggest advice probably would be get close to real behavior. Watch what people do, test ideas in real context, ask sharper questions about what's driving or blocking that behavior. Look into things like motivation, habits, trust, context, culture. And I think it's also important to be thoughtful about how to use these tools. Now, the same techniques that can help people move forward can also backfire or break trust. So I think ethics is also very important, really matters here. And at the end of the day, behavioral science is a structured empathy. And when we combine it with smart business thinking, we are in a much better place to create real lasting value for business, for our customers. And I think companies can get the most of it if they really embed it as well on how teams work, how they think, and how they make decisions and build product.
All right, thanks, Sara and Kate. And so we have to now go to the questions that have come from the audience. So we have 4 questions so far. I don't think we can get to all 4 of them in this session, but of course we will send you responses by email to all those questions. But there's one question, Kate and Sara, which is interesting, and it kind of, uh, 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 it kind of uh, borders on ethics and uh, autonomy when it comes to being nudged. So this question is, how are end users made aware behavioral science is in play? Can they opt out, similar to declining web browser cookies? And so, just in the interest of time, Kate and Sarah, if you can like just answer that in like really quickly.
I
So
would
when,
probably. Oh.
go ahead, Sarah.
Just maybe one sentence, and sorry, just let you go. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate how important it is to balance with ethics and transparency, and user empowerment here is very important, is key. A good nudge will help someone make a better choice for themselves, but it would not manipulate or withhold options, right? So I think it's very important to always be transparent on how we provide options, or how we gather data, and we propose certain recommendations to users, and keep them always informed, in the loop, and in control of the experience.
Yeah, I completely would reiterate what Sarah said as well. There is an ethical obligation when we are looking at implementing behavioral tools within our work. If we think about behavioral science, though, as a methodology or a set of tools that enables the development of a product, there's not really a way to opt out. But we are using it with the intentions of helping the user make better choices for themselves. So it's not that we're trying to push them in a direction that is unhealthy for them, or that in some way, violates what they would be choosing to do. We are helping them to make the right choices more easily.
Excellent. Thanks, Kate and Sarah. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this session, so we have to stop. But what I can assure you all is that the questions that have remained unanswered, we shall respond to those and share them with you via email uh, by next week. Uh, Thank you so much to our panelists, Sarah and Kate, for sharing their brilliant insights and for demonstrating how behavioral insights can be leveraged in your organizations and across different sectors, of course. Thank you also to our attendees for joining us. We hope that these stories and case studies have given you some ideas about how to leverage behavioral science across your entire organizations. And as Kate said, if you're thinking about behavioral science, to use behavioral science in your organizations, don't think too hard, just use it. Just do it. We'll send you a link to the replay, to the recording, and of course, we are happy to answer any questions if you still have them you can put them in the question box. Thanks again, and we look forward to welcoming you to our next webinar. Goodbye for now.